All right, so the first one came when I was rereading the Genesis 2 creation narrative. And it would have been the first time since I read that one in a long time, which is hilarious. And with reading through it, some stuff popped out to me that I hadn't noticed before. One thing that popped out to me in the passage was the amount of times earth popped up in the passage. So for example, it goes, "This is the account of the heavens and the earth were created when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens." So you have heaven, earth, earth, heavens. "Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not sent the rain upon the earth, and no one had worked the ground. But streams came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. And the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Man became a living being. Now the Lord God planted a garden in the east, and he put the man he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees to grow up out of the ground, trees pleasing to the eye and good for food. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals of the birds of the sky. He brought them from the man to see what he would name them. Whatever the man, the living creature, was its name. But for Adam, there was no suitable helper found. So the Lord caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, took one of the man's ribs and closed up the place of the flesh. And the Lord God made woman from the rib, and he taken from the man and brought her to the man." And and then the man said, "Now this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Shall be called woman, for it was taken from the man." One thing that was like that kind of is grounded, pun unintended, telling of the story is very organic and and messy. You see God being very physical. But one thing that's kind of interesting with this that popped out to me in this story is that in Hebrew, it is a gendered language. So just like Spanish, so you have like la tableau or mantanas, where you have a feminine pronouns, and then baños, masculine bathroom. Yeah. So Hebrew is also a gendered language. When God is forming feminine dirt, feminine ground, and ground in the Hebrew has a feminine is a feminine noun. So when God forms man out of the ground, whatever, God is taking feminine earth and creating masculine man. And then when God creates Eve, God has Adam fall into sleep, and then pulls from masculine man and forms feminine woman. Sorry, jumping back in here because I'm terrible at this. The passage also includes puns and wordplay off of this. So the word for earth in ancient Hebrew is Adamah, and then Adam is the first man, which and the word for man in Hebrew is Adam. So earth to man, Adamah to Adam. And so it plays with these connotations of the language from like one to the other, and then the other to another. It's very much so you have this idea of like the two categories of creation, male, female. Some folks, this is how it is. And, you get variations and changes in creation. So it's not to say that, not to speak against like sin being as a thing, but it's to try to expand, maybe to expand someone's horizon. That to show that in the creation of God using a feminine thing to create masculine to create feminine, as in relation to transition and transness, and that mainly not to justify, but just to create a space to say, this is not so foreign or different or wrong. Yeah, so that's my hope with that one. So the earth, the connotation of earth and forming in a human form isn't just there in Genesis 1, but it also occurs in another passage, which is Psalm 139. So starting in verse 13, it says, "For you created my innermost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. My frame was not hidden for you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your books before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts. Oh God, how vast is the sum of them. Back in here. So you have that metaphor of earth and transforming and creating together in Psalm 39 of God knitting together in dirt. A callback to Genesis 1 of putting together and being woven completely. But it's not in a way that stigmatizes queerness. It looks at the mystery and the wonder of these things as a thing of that's holy and created and wonderful. So that I felt was very wholesome, and it could be encouraging. It might help someone see a different perspective. So another passage that might come in handy is the parable of the Good Samaritan. The parable of the Good Samaritan comes from the question of like, what's the most important commandment? And Jesus says the first commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And the person asks, well, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus tells the story of the guy who's traveling and then attacked by bandits and beaten and left for dead. And then a Levite walks by and doesn't stop, and a priest walks by and passes to the other side and goes. And then the Good Samaritan stops by and picks up the man and takes him to an inn and pays for his care to read. And Jesus says, who is that man's neighbor? And he says, the Samaritan. So, but one interesting thing that the YouTuber pointed out in this story is that with the religious codes, that both the Levite and the priest had religious obligations to form. That in Jesus' day, the one way that you were Jewish, one of the key ways, is serving in the temple, offering sacrifices, and participating in the temple of Jerusalem. With the cleanliness codes that priests had to uphold, if they had touched like a bloody body or someone dirty or dying, they would become impure and not be able to serve in the temple. They would have to go through a process of sacrifices and cleaning and time set apart to be able to come back and to actually serve in the temple, to serve God. And so the idea is that Jesus takes this scenario of this person here, and these people passed by. These people passed by, and they had reason to. They could putting themselves to serve the injured man would have put them in a position where they would have to go through a process before going back to serve God. And you get that kind of same dynamic in churches where an elder having a queer kid, serving that kid and providing a safe place might not sit well in that person's congregation, or might create a situation of ambiguity where the elder might have to take time away. So you have this scenario in the parable of the Good Samaritan, where Jesus contrasts two goods, good of keeping yourself pure to serve God or serving your neighbor. And Jesus pulls out to this point. There's a space there. Some might call it grace. These two things aren't so much in tension as some would like to think. The third thing I saw was was about queerness, the choice of queerness and holiness, that one has to choose between being queer, or following God, and which is fascinating for seeing folks trying to carve a space out in religious settings to be able to be both queer and religious at the same time. And so this one passage comes from is kind of what did it mean to be queer or straight back in the time of the first century? So back in the Roman period, and during the time of the Jews, very masculine, patriarchal, dominant society. The man was a king of the household and lorded over it, in control and powerful, had authority. And sexually, the man could, sleep with anybody as long as they were the giver and not the taker. And so stuff that was queer was stuff that deviated from that would take that from that position and change it. That turns into something really weird and interesting is when you think about the cross and the crucifixion. Like, so what would it mean to a first century individual when you have someone like that's a God, powerful, submit to being stripped and have their power taken away from them, being flogged and flailed, and being paraded and shamed in front of everybody, being hung up powerless in front of all, and being pierced, and water and blood pouring out. That would have been subversive. That would have been queer. That would have been gender bending. You have water and blood like a woman giving birth, penetrated by a spear. Thing is like the idea that queerness and holiness are opposed to each other. It's like, what does it mean when Paul writes to a cishet crowd saying, "Take up your cross and follow God"? Like that rolling, twisting feeling in the stomach of like, what a thing challenge to give. Like, to a queer person who's already kind of outside, not so much of a thing. Like, how much more queer do you want us to be? But to someone like as establishment or in the play or in power, very much like, ooh, that's dirty. So you see this dynamic, question of queerness and holiness, and you see in the actions of the passion narrative, the subversion, where Jesus lays off these traditions and through queerness subverts them. So it's not to say, Jesus gay or whatever. You see in a very holy, tender moment, those queerness used with power in accomplishing Jesus' mission. Hopefully you don't have to use these, and but if you do need them to maybe to talk or help expand somebody's thinking through, I hope they help, and I hope they're not offensive, and I hope they find you in a good place doing well. Best of luck. I wish you the best. Hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.